battling crisis upon crisis since last year's State of the Union address. The mounting list of controversies looming over his head ahead of the big night. The New York Post today calling out the Biden administration's latest headache of the China spy flight, the national security threat looming over Biden's speech. Another buzzkill, brutal numbers. Those polls showing the president is underwater on his handling of almost every single key issue. CNN even laid it out with this headline: Biden is in a weak position heading into the State of the Union. The president expected to go hard after Republicans. Well, we know he does it every day. And they are not optimistic that Americans will get words of unity from this president or the truth tonight.
I don't think Joe Biden is going to be reaching across the aisle. I think he's going to try to lecture House Republicans and, frankly, double down on his failed far-left policies that we've seen for the last 2 years.
I think it's going to be rainbows and unicorns, ma'am, and it's clearly not that. You've got a fentanyl crisis. You've got a border that's out of control.
He's not going to address the real issues. He's not going to address the things that he knows that he has been continually failing in. And I think that the American people deserve the transparency and accountability.
Pollster Lee Carter, partner and president at Maslansky's and Partners. We haven't seen each other since a live audience election night, and I know you've been hard at work talking with voters ever since. So the State of the Union, what is the purpose for Biden tonight with that audience? Each president has his own challenges.
Yes. The State of the Union really only speaks to the base. Most people don't watch it if you don't like the president. And so this is his opportunity to really launch his campaign for 2024 and try to lay out what it is that he's going to be trying to do. He's not going to change huge swings in approval numbers. That very, very rarely happens. But what he does need to do is show that he's very much in touch with the issues the American people are facing, and then he's got a plan to make things better.
All right, let's take a look at those polls, at least some of them. Another one now showing that even President Biden's fellow Democrats don't want him to run again. Only 37% of Democrats say yes to a re-election bid. The White House press secretary trying to field a question on those brutal numbers. Here she goes. Dodgeball.
The president has been very clear he intends to run. And, you know, I think the way that we should look at this is what we saw from the midterms. We saw what happened in the Senate. We saw that, yes, Republicans now have Congress, but by a slim majority. And that's because the president went out there, spoke directly to the American people. The president always says this: watch him and see what he does. And I think he has a record over the last 2 years that shows that he has delivered. And that's the numbers that we're going to pay attention to.
As promised, Dodgeball. The question was about low polling.
Yeah.
And she says, watch him. People are watching. That's how you got the low polling.
That's right. And the thing that if I were the president, I'd be most concerned about right now is that 42% of Americans, only 42% of Americans say that he is honest and trustworthy. When he took office, it was
nearly... Is that a conglomerate?
That's a conglomerate, Democrats and Republicans together. When he took office, it was about 60% people said that. The reason, in many ways, that he took office, I think, was because he was honest Uncle Joe. People trusted him to be decent and take care of us. That has completely slipped. Only 16% of Democrats actually say that he is not honest and trustworthy. He's really got an issue when it comes to that. So when he speaks tonight, if he comes across as completely out of touch, that's going to hurt things even more. If you remember, in 1975, Gerald Ford, very famously at the State of the Union address, came out and said, you know what? The State of the Union is not strong. We have a lot of work to do. Joe Biden would benefit from doing something like that because most people on every single issue feel terribly about where we are from an economic perspective, a national security perspective, on immigration. As you saw those numbers, he's underwater on every front. The only thing that Joe Biden can take comfort in is that people don't trust Democrats or Republicans any more than they trust him.
Wow. All right, real quickly, the State of the Union speech. Sometimes presidents, about half the time, I think, you've reported before, see a bump. But is it sustainable?
No. They usually are. I mean, you might see a small bump up to about 5 percentage points. That would be significant. That doesn't happen most of the time. I think we're going to see him stay relatively flat. What he might be able to do is on certain issues make progress. Oftentimes you see the president try to lay out an agenda and say, this is what I'm going to do to address immigration, or this is what I'm going to do to address China, or this is what I'm going to do to address the economy. Something that's going to make us feel better on one of the issues, and I think that's what his real goal should be tonight.
Wow, that sounded like a hallucination.
Yeah.
Right? For him to start with like China and immigration, but who knows, maybe.
Who knows? I mean, he did tweet that he's been preparing really hard for this speech yesterday. So my hope is that he really does get in touch with the American people right now. What they don't want is more division. They don't want to hear him attacking Republicans. That's not going to help us. What we want to hear is what he's going to do to make things better for all of us.
Well, and I know his team reportedly has been concerned about any gaffes or stumbles or anything like that. So they have him repeating that speech reportedly. Lee Carter, it is great to have you.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.